If you've been scrolling through endless subwoofer options, watching video after video trying to decide whether a tiny model can actually fill your room, you're probably feeling a mix of excitement and doubt. You want that thunder-deep bass for movies and music, but you also don't want a monster cabinet that eats up your living room space or forces you to rearrange furniture. That hesitation is real, and it's exactly why I'm doing this deep dive today. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The SVS 3000 Micro or Evolution in gloss black tries to sit in that sweet spot between raw power and a footprint that won't dominate the room. At first glance, the sleek cabinet looks like something you could tuck into a modern home theater setup without its screaming subwoofer. But the real question is whether that compact 11-inch enclosure can actually deliver the kind of low-frequency impact you expect from an SVS, and whether it makes sense for your specific listening environment. Let's start with the basics of how the unit is built. Inside the relatively small box lives a pair of 9-inch drivers that face each other, what SVS calls a dual opposing configuration. The idea is that the drivers push and pull the air in opposite directions, which helps to cancel out some of the cabinet vibrations you'd normally feel and gives a cleaner, more even bass response across the room. That's a design you'll usually find in larger subs, so seeing it packed into an 11-inch shell is already a hint that SVS is trying to squeeze performance into a smaller package. Power is where the 3000 Micro really steps up. The integrated Class D amplifier is rated for 1200 watts continuous and can spike past 4000 watts in short bursts. In practical terms, that means the sub can handle those sudden explosions in an action film or the low-end rumble of a bass-heavy track without clipping or sounding strained. The Class D design also keeps heat buildup low, which is a nice bonus for a cabinet that's tucked into a tight spot. No need for big cooling fans that add noise. One of the most useful pieces of tech in the sub is the 295 MHz analog devices DSP. It's a mouthful, but what it does for you is give a menu of presets and fine-tuning options that let you match the sub's output to the acoustics of your room. If you've ever tried to get a sub to sound right in a bedroom with a carpeted floor on one side and a concrete wall on the other, you know how much of a headache that can be. The DSP lets you adjust phase, volume, and even a built-in equalizer that compensates for room modes, so you're not left guessing whether the bass is too boomy or too thin. For people who aren't comfortable fiddling with a lot of external EQ gear, this built-in flexibility is a big practical win. Now, let's talk about placement. Because the cabinet is only about a foot wide and a foot tall, you can slide it under a sofa, tuck it into a corner, or even mount it on a wall with the appropriate brackets. Just keep in mind it weighs a fair amount for its size. In my own testing, placing it a few inches away from a solid wall gave a tighter punch than dead-end corner placement, which tends to over-accentuate the low frequencies and can muddy the sound. The dual opposing drivers also mean you have a bit more leeway with placement. You won't get the boom 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 feeling that some single driver subs have when they're too close to a wall. That said, if you have a very open space like a large living room with high ceilings, this sub will still give you a solid foundation, but you'll start to notice the difference between it and a bigger, 15-inch cabinet when you crank the volume for a home theater night with a full-blast soundtrack. Who should consider the 3000 Micro? If you're a home theater enthusiast living in an apartment or a modest-sized room, this is probably the most convenient way to get SVS-level bass without sacrificing floor space. It's also a good match for gamers who want that visceral feel of explosions in a first-person shooter without having to install a massive sub in a cramped desk setup. Music lovers who enjoy genres with deep bass like EDM, hip-hop, or modern orchestral scores will appreciate the clean low end that stays articulate even at higher volumes. Because the DSP gives you a lot of control, the sub can be tuned for both cinematic impact and musical precision, which is a rare combination in such a small box. On the flip side, there are some scenarios where you might want to look elsewhere. If you have a dedicated home theater room that's 20 feet or larger, or if you're building a high-end audiophile setup where you want multiple subs working in tandem, the 3000 Micro's output, while impressive for its size, may not fill the space as uniformly as a larger 12-inch or 15-inch model. Also, if your budget is tight, the SVS name and the built-in DSP push this.